This little video series is called Dying Dar's Way. I'm here with my friend Audrey Braam, who is going to describe the passing of her father in 1997 of Johannes Braam, originally born in
the Netherlands.
And could we just start a little bit earlier? What was your relationship with your father like?
So as a child, he was a very driven man, and he came here as an immigrant. He came here not knowing English. He came here in 1954 with his wife Jeanette, my mother, and my sister Cecilia, who was born in Holland as well, and went to engineering school, put himself through engineering school. He going to school with no English and then working full time. So he's very ambitious, very driven, and sometimes could be known to be very angry. But I think in retrospect that was all about fear.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to be an adult with him was a very difficult thing, and I think that I never really found my adult voice with him. I was always a child trying to figure out what my voice was, how to argue with him, how to talk to him. He was a prickly man. He was hard to love, but I admired him a great deal.
I know you admired him, and it wasn't easy. How about towards his final months? He's out where? He's in Oregon.
He's in Oregon.
You're out here.
I'm in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, actually, having just bought a house. He's in Oregon with his second wife, Maria. He's retired with the cancer diagnosis, prostate cancer, and by now has metastasized to his organs, probably his lungs and his brain. So I saw him in November for Thanksgiving of '96. And he was not so verbal. He was having trouble walking and maneuvering, but he was still listening to music, still active in terms of gardening and reading. I got my love of reading from him for certain. And then the next time I saw him was when Maria gave us a call, my sister and myself, saying it's probably close to the end. And by that time he was receiving, this is February now of 1997, he was receiving hospice care in home. The hospital bed was in the middle of the living room. And I think that he was very fortunate in that he had a wife who was willing to have him at home. Sometimes the processes, I get that sometimes the things that happen to the body, the deterioration, is hard for the family to deal with. But there is a great support system out there in hospice care.
Is that the icky stuff?
The icky stuff,
yeah.
Like pee and poop and blood and, whatever it might be.
It's not pretty.
It's not pretty.
Mm-mm.
And it may be hard for people to deal with, but hospice care is pretty amazing. The hospice nurses are pretty amazing, and they were for him.
So you had great support from hospice. That's certainly my experience too. You also brought some of your own support with you in the form of a yoga practice that you're devoted to. Can you talk about that?
At that time, I was very actively practicing yoga, working on meditation. At first when you sit and meditate, you've got an itchy this or itchy that, or this hurts or that hurts. But by that time, my meditation practice was fairly well established, and I think that did me, or had me in good stead for sitting with my father, mm-hmm. because that's what ended up happening for about 5 days, was that I sat. When I got there, I sat with him the whole day, either talking to him or reading or singing or not doing much of anything, humming or holding his hand. He wasn't speaking except in Dutch. I wanted to ask him if he was speaking to his mother or to his father. He was asking questions, but I couldn't understand it. It was a little bit garbled. At that point, he was also getting some morphine. So at the beginning, when I first got there, he was still eating a little bit. Towards the fourth day, I don't think he was eating at all. And that's also when the the body starts voiding. So
voiding what?
Voiding poop and pee.
Right, lots of urinating towards the end.
Yes. The kidneys are emptying out, the bowels are emptying out, and that's something that Maria was prepared for in the shape of adult diapers and things like that.
And she knew the signs that death was getting close.
She did seem to, yes.
Okay, and I think the hospice people probably instruct you in the breathing changes and so forth. So
yes.
You knew what to expect.
Breathing changes, temperature changes also. The body loses its ability to regulate temperature, so it gets clammy. It starts to heat up and sweat, and then it gets clammy, and they get too warm or they get too cold. I had that experience with my mother as well. Too many blankets,
right.
Too heavy, so yes, the body changes, and you end up observing all of these changes, just kind of watching. And that's what I was able to do, was sit there and watch and take it in.
I remember you're describing the moment of his passing 22 years ago, when it actually happened, and you were almost an ethereal, describing not only the final moments, but staying with his body. It was for a few hours, right? Can you describe that period?
It was, when he passed, of course, it was breathing changes, and the pulse eventually slows down, the heartbeat changes. He wasn't responsive, but the body was just slowing down. The breathing was larger and larger spaces in between. So both Maria and I were there, and I was holding his hand. But when the heartbeat stopped, it was just a piece, like you were waiting for that next breath to be taken, and it doesn't happen. And it's almost as though you're taking it in a breath for him. I remember taking a deep breath in and just realizing that there was this, that I could feel this expanse. There was an expanding of, I don't know what to describe it except for the universe. It was almost like my mind was expanding, like I could feel that the spirit was traveling somewhere, or just dissipating, or something. I felt that there was something there, and I find it very difficult to describe.
It wasn't nothing.
Something
was definitely happening.
Yeah, something was definitely happening. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't he was there one moment and gone the next.
Right.
It was a time period. And I'm sure that, there are many deaths that are different. If you have a catastrophic death, that's a completely different situation. But this is
quite typical with cancer.
Yes,
yeah,
I think so.
This is often how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's a slow release in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful, because even as much as I have studied and read up on this, I haven't seen a whole lot of people sharing so intimately as you're doing now. And whenever I get feedback on these videos, it's usually our vulnerability in invitations into private moments that are really meaningful and helpful to our viewers. Thank you, Audrey.
You're very welcome.